when you think about this from an enterprise governance perspective, obviously
Mhm.
something you've had to think about with a lot of different types of emerging technologies.
Mhm.
Where do the weak spots happen?
I mean, that is one of the strongest areas that IBM's been in, and I'm not doing an IBM commercial. I just want to make sure everybody understands where IBM's position is. We pretty much took the whole concept of AI back in 1952 with Model 5180 and actually proved out that AI could exist. And so that's why I say it's AI 3.0, and now it's 3.1, and each one of these iterations gets more sophisticated and better based on the modeling and everything else that goes along with it. But one of the biggest, strongest points that IBM puts out there is our governance side. And so we have a product called watsonx.gov. Governance is one of the most, I'd say, popular type of technologies that we market to our businesses and clients across the board, because basically they want to make sure that they can control what's happening from an hallucination standpoint, what biases banks are interested in that, all these different companies are, because they want to make sure that those agents communicate or interact with the end user properly. And it goes back to the concept of how do you control these agents and where they go and what they do. And that's like the next level for the governance piece of it. Because at this point, most companies are looking at governance as a point of view for really specific areas that address law and regulations. But the next level is, all right, how do you govern these agents that are just kind of running around and just learning things on their own without any kind of guardrails? And that's what makes our, Watson X type platform so strong and why we're doing so well. And I think if you look at that from that perspective of how you actually create it, engineer it, develop it, and then design it, that has to be a key part of it when you test it out. And I think you're going to see more governance interjected into the overall creation of agentic AI.
Mhm. Yeah, interesting to hear about that. The governance of independent agents, especially as
Right.
because that's just part of that promise of these agents that they are supposed to be able to work
But
independently on their
a
own.
lot of people don't talk about this with AI. It's really interesting is the data integrity, the data capabilities, the data quality. Because if you don't have data quality, if the data is not correct, automatically that agent's going to go out and do different things that it shouldn't be doing.
But
So you've got to go in and cleanse the data and make sure the data is correct in the first place when you're building up that model. That's the importance of having a data scientist on board or data scientist to be able to do that.
I think that that's, by the way, it's true not only for AI, even, it seems like a long time ago, but even when ML kind of broke into our life,
Right.
if you have, the model is as good as the data that you feed into it. That's a cliche that everyone knows.
But it's so true.
It is completely
It is.
100% true. But I think that if the data is wrong, then regardless of what you do, even human will get it wrong. Human will get it wrong, agent will get it wrong, model will get it wrong. But once the model, like I think that the data needs to be as clean as possible. It's never perfect.
Right.
But the question is how agent can help us kind of also overcome. I think one of the things that ML is not doing very well with while human can is that if
Mhm.
there is seeing let's say a small outlier in the data, a human will identify those. Will say, well, this is might be an outlier, and not necessarily I'm going to pull all my attention to it. ML will usually not. It will just spit out whatever that may be with his weights. And I think that AI in many cases can say that something is wrong. In some cases, we're seeing, for example, we're using AI extensively in order to do QA on our data. And
Right.
in many cases, the AI will kind of the model will say, it doesn't seem, for example, if you have an email for a person, he's working in company A, however, his email, the domain is different, AI will immediately identify that there is something wrong with the email and point that out. That's just an example to
Exactly.
how quality can work.
I think that's like the explainability part of it, right? That's like almost goes without saying. When we talk about governance, I think you're also talking about the flip side of the coin, where we just want to know where the answers are coming from and with what degree of confidence, I
Mhm.
assume. I don't think data, again, maybe a spicier take. I don't think data cleanliness is going to be an issue in the sense I don't think it's something humans are going to deal with. I think it's something that you layer an agentic
Mhm.
layer on top of. I think with the advent of like synthetic data, synthetic users, even, I think all of that is in service to kind of fix this idea of like humans will never get the data right. It's always going to be messy in that sense. So in order to best use these platforms, like you have to find a technology solution to that for sure.
Tuba, that's a really interesting point because I feel like a lot of vendors are right now saying AI, especially called legacy vendors, are saying AI is all about the data. Data cleanliness and data quality are paramount to even getting started with building models and building agents. But what are the actual biggest challenges of getting started to create an agent in production? What level of, call it, cleanliness or visibility or observability do you really have to get to be able to get started? Or is this a different type of technology where it is less, call it, deterministic or fixed, and more conceptual in nature?
I think it's there's a mixed bag here.
Mm-hmm.
So in the current world that we're in, I think the best way to kind of productionize an agent is to, again, to Ed's point, like have some level of governance, have some level of observability that a human can interact with. So you force some sort of like reinforcement learning, some sort of like human in the loop feedback that allows you to get there faster. That's the world now. I think in my head, I say 3 to 5 years, maybe it's a little bit longer. I do think that there's this concept of like agency, like evaluators, etc., that kind of help determine when a product is ready to graduate from one level to another level, from like the level
Mm-hmm.
of pilot to actually productionize. The one thing I'll say is increasingly with a lot of technical founders, this concept of like MVP is very, very vague now. And like MVP to actually a productionized app, like you'll see a lot of productionized apps that are just still what you would consider from like a bigger SaaS company's perspective as like tiny little pilots that they're running. And I think that it's good to look at that and make sure that we're not conflating technical limitations with like ROI limitations in the sense like they might just pilot things longer to make sure the right kind of value is proven out versus taking a long time to deploy something in production at a massive scale because like technically it can or cannot work. So I think there are like two lenses there.
Yeah, interesting. Omar, I know you have a couple of thoughts here.
Yeah.
No, I think that's specifically in terms of, yeah, I'm going to go back to the ethical point. Like, how do you think of that from the ground up? And I think that specifically with ground go to market, I think that privacy is an issue from that perspective. And so in the last 5 years or 6 years between CCPA and GDPR, you can see kind of a massive the whole industry kind of focus on how to bring those regulation to life and actually make sure that you actually withstand those regulation. That was hard, and now a new standard is coming up with how we interact with AI and how we make sure that PII is saved within that area. If you think about, that you shouldn't train data on PII as an example, but there is 100 of those. So I think that one of the issues or one of the difficulties that we currently see, and by the way, uh, we see a lot of companies, big and small, not only enterprise, already are deep inside and kind of deep into the question of what are they letting their data and their PII, run on. Are you giving, for any AI can run? Can you run DeepSeek with, a list of all of your employees, for example, as a question, should we do that or not? And I think that this is something that regulation is already working on, but I think that there is one thing of defining the regulation and then another layer of how to adopt those regulations, make sure that you actually, meet those criterias. That can take a much longer while.